Rude boss fired her for being late, not knowing she was saving his mother's life. Asterisk, asterisk. You're done here. The words hit Samantha like a slap. Her boss, Ray Foster, didn't even look up from his leather-bound planner as he slid the termination notice across the desk. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. You've been late 3 times. I run a company, not a charity, he snapped. Adjusting his watch, Samantha stood frozen, heart pounding. You don't even know what I was doing, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I don't care, he said coldly. This meeting is over. She turned to leave, then paused. I hope your mother's okay, he blinked. Excuse me? But Samantha was already gone. The sound came like a clap of thunder in the silence of the early morning. Thud. Samantha single quotes S eyes snapped open. Her room was still dark, the digital clock on her nightstand glowing 5:17 a.m. in soft red digits. For a moment, she thought she had dreamed it, then another sound, a scraping, something uneven. Desperate, she sat up instantly, heart pounding. The walls in this building were old and thin. She heard everything: fights, whispers, laughter, sobbing. But this was different. This was primal. Then came the voice, weak, shaking. Help. She jumped out of bed, grabbing the oversized hoodie she always kept at the end of her mattress. Throwing it on, she hurried to the front door of her apartment, unlocking the 3 stubborn deadbolts with shaking fingers. When she opened it, cold air from the hallway rushed in along with a groan. Mrs. Foster? Her elderly neighbor lay sprawled on the carpet just outside her door, one hand clutching her chest, the other reaching weakly in the air, as if trying to grab onto something that wasn't there. Her nightgown was soaked through with sweat, her skin the color of ash. Double quotes Mrs. Foster. Samantha cried, kneeling beside her. The old woman tried to speak but could only manage a gurgled, raspy breath. Samantha fumbled with her phone, fingers trembling so badly she nearly dropped it twice. She dialed 911 and pressed the speakerphone button. 911, what's your emergency? My neighbor just collapsed outside my apartment. She's having trouble breathing. Please, we need help. Is she conscious? Yes, but barely. She's pale and she says her chest hurts. Paramedics are en route. Keep her calm. Is she responsive? Samantha leaned down. Mrs. Foster? It's Sam. You're going to be okay. Help is coming. The woman's eyelids fluttered. Her lips parted. Don't call my son. Samantha blinked. What? Why not? Please, just you. Then she passed out. Ma'am? The dispatcher said. She just fainted, Samantha said, her voice cracking. Please hurry. The next 10 minutes stretched into forever. Samantha grabbed the spare pillow from her couch, sliding it gently under Mrs. Foster's head. She stayed on the ground beside her, whispering soft reassurances, though she wasn't even sure if the woman could hear. Everything felt surreal, the flickering hallway lights, the soft hum of pipes behind the walls, the faint scent of burnt toast from someone else's apartment. Somewhere, a baby began to cry. Then came the sirens. Samantha jumped to her feet, running barefoot down the hallway to flag them down. 2 EMTs burst through the door with a stretcher and oxygen tank. A third followed with a monitor pack. Samantha stepped back but hovered close, answering every question they asked. She's 82, she said. Lives alone. I see her sometimes when she checks her mail. I've helped her carry groceries. She doesn't have anyone nearby. Her son, maybe, but I've never seen him visit. What's her name? Eleanor Foster. The EMTs worked quickly, placing an oxygen mask over her face, checking her vitals. The monitor beeped rapidly, an erratic heartbeat. The woman's skin was cold to the touch. She's going into a fib, one EMT muttered. We need to move. As they began wheeling her out, one paused and turned to Samantha. Are you family? She hesitated, then nodded. Yes. The ride in the ambulance was tight and tense. Samantha sat in the front seat, listening to every beep and command exchanged behind her. She gripped her hoodie sleeves, heart pounding. They were racing through red lights, the city still sleepy around them. Why did she say not to call her son? By the time they reached the emergency room, Mrs. Foster was stabilized but unconscious. Samantha signed the forms, her fingers still shaking. When the nurse looked at her questioningly, Samantha simply said, "She's my neighbor." "But she asked me to come, please." The nurse nodded, quietly impressed. For the next few hours, Samantha sat in the corner of the sterile hospital room, still in her pajamas and hoodie, eyes locked on the rise and fall of Eleanor's chest. The woman's purse had fallen during the collapse. Samantha had picked it up and now sat with it in her lap, thumbing through it only when the nurse asked for identification and insurance. There were photos inside. A young man in a cap and gown, another in a business suit. Both clearly the same. Person's sharp jawline, cold smile. Ray Foster. Samantha froze when she saw the name. Her boss. That same unreadable, condescending expression in the photo that she saw daily in the office. It couldn't be. But then she found a letter tucked away in a zippered compartment, dated nearly a year ago. "Ray, I know you're busy. I don't want anything. Just wanted you to know I miss you. I'm proud of you. Love, Mom." Samantha's stomach twisted. Her fingers curled around the paper. He never even opened it. Nurse came in around 9 a.m. and gave Samantha a bottle of water and a blanket. "You don't have to stay, sweetheart," the nurse said gently. "She's stable now." Samantha shook her head. "I don't want her to wake up alone." "You're a good person," the nurse said softly, then walked away. It wasn't the first time Samantha had been told that, but it felt heavier this time. Like a quiet truth whispered in the wake of chaos. She stared at the small, frail woman in the hospital bed and thought, this could be my mother one day. Alone, forgotten, just like her. Then her gaze dropped to the clock on the wall, 9:37. Amechi, our eyes went wide. Her shift started at 8:30. Oh no. Samantha burst into her apartment just after 10, scrambled to change clothes, and threw her hair into a messy bun. She didn't have time for a shower or even breakfast. She texted her friend and co-worker Kayla, "Running late, emergency. Tell Ray, I'm coming." Kayla texted back, "Girl, he's already mad." Like mad. Samantha shoved her phone in her bag and bolted down the hallway. Her heart beat louder than her footsteps. She knew how this looked. It was her third time being late in 2 weeks. Once for a dentist appointment she couldn't reschedule. Once because the bus never showed. And now this. But this time was different. This time she had saved someone's life. She arrived at the office breathless, flushed, and disheveled. Ray Foster was waiting. He didn't yell, didn't demand an explanation. Just gave her that icy look and said, "My office, now." And she knew what was coming. The silence in Ray Foster's office was not empty, it was heavy. Like a thundercloud waiting to split open. Samantha stood just inside the door, her chest rising and falling as she tried to quiet the rush of adrenaline from her chaotic morning. Ray sat behind his desk, fingers steepled beneath his chin, staring at her the way a wolf might study something small and squirming. "Shut the door." She obeyed. The click of the latch behind her sounded final, like a verdict being passed. "I could fire you," he said calmly. Too calmly. Samantha swallowed. "I know. But you're going to give me a story, an excuse. Just like last week." "It's not an excuse," she said, stepping forward. "My neighbor collapsed outside my apartment, an elderly woman. She nearly died. I rode in the ambulance. With her, I stayed at the hospital until they stabilized her." Ray's jaw tensed. Something flickered across his face, too brief to catch, but it was there. Then he scoffed, leaned back and crossed his arms. "You expect me to believe that?" Samantha's voice hardened. "I don't care if you believe me. I did the right thing. That caught him off guard. His brows lifted a fraction, surprised by the heat in her voice. He rose from his chair slowly, walking around the desk until he stood just feet from her. "You've worked here 8 months, Samantha. You were lucky to get this job with your ... ground." There it was, the dig. She knew it was coming. Every time she faltered, every time she needed a little grace, he made sure to remind her of where she came from. The debt. The college dropout. The second chance employment record that hung over her like a collar. "I've worked my ass off here," she said, squaring her shoulders. "I've never missed a deadline. I stay late, I cover shifts. If all of that is outweighed by me being human for one morning, then maybe this job isn't worth it." A beat. Then another. Ray tilted his head, studying her like something unfamiliar, and then, quietly, what was the name of this woman? Eleanor Foster. There it was again, that flicker. A crack in his composure. His lips parted slightly, but he said nothing. "You know her, don't you?" Samantha said, eyes narrowing. Ray blinked, then laughed, but it was hollow. A sound stretched thin over something raw. "Of course not. The name's just ... common." "No, it's not," she said. "And I saw her purse. Photos, letters, you." That stopped him cold. She watched his face stiffen. His jaw clenched so tightly the tendons in his neck jumped. "You went through her things?" She collapsed. "The nurses needed ID. I did what I had to do. You should have seen the way she looked at me, begging me not to call her son." Her own son. Ray turned away, pacing slowly toward the window. His hands were fists at his sides. "I haven't spoken to her in years," he said finally. "She made her choices." "What choices?" Samantha asked. "You don't know anything about it. Maybe not. But I know what it feels like to be left. And I know what it looks like when someone's still hoping to be loved, even after being forgotten." Ray spun to face her, anger flashing in his eyes. "Don't pretend you understand me." "I'm not," Samantha said quietly. "But I understand her." There was silence then, thick, heavily suspended between them. Finally, Ray's voice dropped. "She was always ... sick. Not physically. Just ... weak. My whole life I watched her clean offices at night, smile at people who ignored her, scrape to survive. I hated it. I promised myself I'd never be like her." "You didn't want to be weak," Samantha said softly. "I wanted power. Control. A life with no begging." Samantha walked to his desk and gently set down the letter she'd taken from. "The purse. I think she just wanted you to come home." Even once, Ray didn't touch the letter. Didn't even look at it. "I'll consider your lateness excused," he said after a long pause. "But don't mistake this for forgiveness." Samantha looked at him one last time before walking out. "I'm not asking for yours. I just hope one day you'll ask for hers." The rest of the day passed like molasses through cold glass. Emails, meetings, more emails. Samantha sat at her desk, trying to concentrate on invoices, but her mind kept drifting. Eleanor's frail body in the hospital bed, the faded photograph of Ray, smiling just a little, in a graduation cap, and that unopened letter. There was something in all of it that didn't make sense. If Ray had turned his back on his mother ... why did his hand shake when she said her name? By 3 p.m., Samantha couldn't take it anymore. She opened a new browser window and began searching. Eleanor Foster, Ray Foster, Raymond Foster family background, CEO of Foster Tech Mother. Most of the results were about Ray Press. Releases, tech summits, Forbes interviews. But then one article caught her eye. It was from a small local paper dated 12 years ago. "Local woman fired after taking son to work night shift. I had no other choice," says single mother Eleanor Foster after losing janitorial job when video surfaces of her sleeping child on utility closet floor. The company cited liability and safety violations. No comment from management. Samantha felt her breath hitch. That son was Ray. She clicked to enlarge the grainy photo. There she was, Eleanor, looking 20 years younger, eyes tired but proud, standing beside a tiny boy who clutched her hand like a lifeline. The boy had Ray's eyes. Samantha leaned back in her chair, heart aching. She imagined Ray as that child, not yet hardened, not yet cold. Just a boy who loved his mother and maybe didn't understand why the world punished her so ruthlessly. What had changed him? What made him turn that love into shame? And what would happen if he saw this article again, if he was forced to remember? At 5:45, as people began packing up to leave, Samantha's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. Hello? Miss Reyes? The voice was soft, with the clipped efficiency of a nurse. Yes, speaking. This is St. Luke's Hospital. Eleanor Foster is awake. She's asking for you. Samantha arrived 40 minutes later, bringing a small bag with essential slippers, a toothbrush, and a book from her shelf, Little Women, the copy her own mother had read to her as a child. Eleanor looked smaller somehow, curled in the hospital bed like a question mark. But her eyes lit up when Samantha walked in. You stayed, she whispered. Of course I did, Samantha said, pulling a chair beside the bed. I'm not going anywhere. Eleanor blinked slowly. I didn't want them to call Ray. No, I haven't seen him in 10 years. Last time we spoke, he said I embarrassed him. That everything I did to survive made him ashamed. Samantha's chest tightened. He saw you cleaning floors and thought it meant you failed. Eleanor nodded, but I never asked for his help. Never asked him to save me. You didn't have to, Samantha said gently. You just needed him to see you. Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes but didn't fall. She looked at Samantha, searching her face like it held something precious. You remind me of me. Back when I still believed people were good. I still believe it, Samantha whispered. Sometimes. Eleanor reached out, her hand trembling. And Samantha took it. Outside the window, the sky had turned lavender, streaked with the last light of day. And in that fragile moment, surrounded by hospital machines and silence, Samantha made a silent vow she would not let this woman be forgotten. Again. It was almost midnight when Samantha sat alone at her kitchen table, the city lights outside painting her ceiling in shifting reflections of yellow and blue. The only sound was the soft hum of her refrigerator and the distant rumble of a train. She hadn't been able to sleep since leaving the hospital. On the table sat the letter, Eleanor's letter, the one she had quietly taken from Eleanor's hospital purse days before and returned to her, after their last conversation. But tonight, Eleanor had pressed it into her hand once more. He won't read it if it comes from me, Eleanor had whispered as Samantha tucked the blanket under her chin. Maybe if it comes from you. And now here it sat, sealed, in soft cream paper with her son's name written in delicate script, Raymond. Samantha stared at it like it might detonate. Part of her felt guilty reading it was a violation. But another part knew that if there were answers about who Ray really was, about why this man who wielded power so coldly had built a fortress around his heart, they lived within this envelope. After a long pause, she opened it. The ink was faded slightly, as if the letter had been rewritten over and over before finally being sealed. It was long, raw, full of the kind of things people only say when they know their voice might not ever be heard. My dearest Ray, if you're reading this, it means you've opened your heart enough to let something in, and for that, I'm already grateful. I know you believe I failed you, that I was weak, that I embarrassed you. But I want to tell you the truth, the kind you were too young to see and I was too proud to explain. When you were 5, I cleaned offices during the day and waitressed at night. Do you remember when you used to fall asleep under the table at Murphy's Diner? I'd slide a pillow under your head and tell customers you were just tired from school. I was scared someone would call social services. But we made it through. And then came the night they fired me for bringing you to my cleaning shift. You'd had a fever. The sitter canceled. I wrapped you in my coat and laid you on a towel in the janitor's closet. You coughed so hard I thought your lungs would break, but they didn't fire me because I endangered you. They fired me because the CEO didn't want to see poverty on display. That CEO, his name was George Foster, your father's brother. Yes, Ray, he's the one who gave you your last name. But never a cent. I never told you because I didn't want you growing up bitter. But you idolized him. You didn't know he watched me struggle and chose to do nothing. He cut us off completely. You changed after that. You started working 3 jobs in college. You stopped calling. You wore suits that didn't fit and practiced your signature in notebooks. I watched. You built a life out of ambition. I was so proud. And so scared. Because somewhere in there, I saw you lose your softness. I don't want your forgiveness. I just want you to remember that I never stopped loving you, and that no matter what you believe, you were never a burden to me. Always, Mom Samantha. Sat back, eyes burning. The truth hit her like a blow. Ray Foster had built an empire on top of the ashes of his own abandonment. And what he'd mistaken for weakness in his mother had been sacrifice, the purest kind. She hadn't failed him. She'd protected him, even from the ugliness of his own bloodline. He'd grown up trying to outrun the shame, only to replicate the cruelty. Samantha pressed the letter to her chest and let the weight of it settle. She couldn't hand this over to him, yet not when he would tear it apart without reading it. She needed a plan. The next morning, Samantha arrived at the Foster Tech building early, her mind racing. Ray wasn't in yet. She took the opportunity to visit HR. Janine, the HR manager, greeted her with a forced smile. Samantha. Everything okay? Actually, Samantha said carefully, I was wondering if I could ask you something. Unofficially. Janine raised an eyebrow but nodded. Have there ever been payouts or non-disclosure agreements tied to Ray's family? His mother specifically? Janine's smile faltered. She leaned in slightly. Why are you asking? I think there's a part of Ray's story that's been buried. I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I just want to help someone heal. Janine exhaled slowly. There's no official record, but I've heard whispers. Years ago, the company settled quietly with a woman who was let go under questionable circumstances. She claimed to be a single mother, dismissed for bringing her child to work. The board chalked it up to liability, but there were ethics concerns. The child's name? Raymond. Samantha's heart pounded. Was it ever confirmed? Janine looked around, then opened a drawer. She slid a copy of an old disciplinary file across the desk. Technically, this doesn't exist anymore, but I thought you should see it. Samantha opened the folder. Inside was a grainy scan of a report from 2002. Employee, Eleanor Foster incident. Unauthorized presence of minor on premises. Outcome, termination. No compensation. Noted, minor identified as Raymond Foster. There it was. The truth. In black and white. That afternoon, Samantha walked into Ray's office and placed the folder on his desk. I need you to read something. Ray looked up from his laptop, his expression blank. Is this about another noble excuse? No, she said, voice steady. It's about your mother. Ray stared at the folder for a long moment before slowly opening it. His eyes scanned the document, then stopped. The room was silent for nearly a minute. When he looked up, his face had gone pale. Where did you get this? HR, off the record. You had no right. I had every right, she interrupted, her voice shaking now. You treat her like she disappeared on you, like she abandoned you for being poor. But the truth is, she lost everything trying to keep you safe. And you cut her out because you couldn't face how much you needed her. He slammed the folder shut. This is none of your business. Samantha stepped forward, trembling. She almost died last week, and all she asked for was you. Not a doctor, not a priest, just her son. Ray looked away. Samantha pulled the letter from her bag. She gave me this. For you, but I read it. I'm sorry. Ray didn't move. Read it, Ray, she said softly. Because whatever kind of man you think you are, this letter proves you were loved, completely. And if you can't face that, then maybe you've already lost everything that matters. She placed it on his desk and turned to leave. But as she reached the door, Ray's voice broke the silence. I still have her photo in my wallet. Samantha paused. I haven't looked at it in years, he said, but I never threw it away. Samantha turned back. For the first time, she saw something human in him, no longer the cold CEO, but a boy stuck in the wreckage of a wound he never let heal. You still can, she said gently. You just have to choose differently. That night, Ray stood outside St. Luke's Hospital, the letter clutched in his hands. He hadn't opened it yet. He couldn't, but he was here. He took a breath, then stepped inside. Down the corridor, in room 314, a woman lay quietly in bed, half asleep, her face illuminated by the pale glow of the TV. Ray paused in the doorway, the letter still pressed to his chest. Mom? He said softly. Eleanor's eyes fluttered open. For a moment she stared, unsure. And then she whispered, Raymond? His throat tightened. His fingers trembled. I got your letter, he said. I didn't know. I didn't know what they did to you. She smiled gently, tears welling in her tired eyes. You were just a boy. You weren't supposed to carry that. He walked to her side, knelt beside the bed, and took her hand. I'm sorry, he said. And for the first time in years, Raymond Foster wept, not as his CEO, not as a man made of armor, but as a son. The day after Ray's late-night visit to the hospital, everything changed. He hadn't told anyone he'd gone to see Eleanor, not even Samantha. But something in him had cracked open, like a glass fortress finally admitting light. Still, he didn't speak about it. He didn't explain the tear-streaked conversation, the way she squeezed his hand like it was her lifeline, or how she had drifted back to sleep whispering, I knew you'd come. But when he walked into the office that morning, people noticed the difference. He didn't bark orders. He didn't wear his trademark scowl. And most shocking of all, he smiled at Samantha. Samantha, meanwhile, had barely slept. She'd been thinking about Eleanor. The letter, the grief Ray had buried so deep it warped into ambition. She wondered if Ray was going to change, or if he'd just had a moment of weakness in the presence of mortality. She didn't know what to expect until her phone rang. It was the hospital. Miss Hayes? This is Dr. Kumar from St. Luke's. I'm sorry to call, but Eleanor Foster passed away in her sleep early this morning. Samantha froze. Her hand went cold around the phone. I wasn't her family, she said. You were listed as her emergency contact, the doctor said gently. There's something else. Before she passed, she had her lawyer bring in an envelope. It's addressed to you. She said you'd know what to do. Samantha could barely breathe. I'll be right there. The hospital room was quiet, sterile. Eleanor's bed was already stripped, the walls too bare. Samantha stood there, staring at the emptiness, feeling something vast and aching settle in her chest. A nurse approached, handing her a manila envelope. She said this was urgent. Samantha opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a handwritten note and a document stamped with the seal of a legal office. Samantha, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. But I want you to know something important. You reminded me that not all kindness is forgotten. You didn't owe me anything, but you gave me dignity, and in my final days, that meant everything. I've included my revised will. Please make sure Raymond gets this. He deserves to know the truth about what I owned, what I left behind, and what he comes from. You don't have to stay in his life, but I believe you were meant to be in it. Thank you. Eleanor. Samantha unfolded the attached legal document. It wasn't just a will. It was a confession. Eleanor had quietly inherited a small fortune. Stocks and land deeds passed down by her estranged father, who'd never acknowledged her publicly. She had kept it hidden, part pride, part fear that Ray would see it as proof she'd failed to use it. She wanted him to know only that she'd loved him, not that she could have given him more, but now she had left it to him. All of it, a quiet legacy. One he never knew existed. Samantha stared at the total listed at the bottom. $4.2 million. Back at Foster Tech, Samantha paced outside. Ray's office. How do you tell a man who built himself from nothing that the woman he thought abandoned him left behind millions? How do you tell him his entire life, the hunger, the rage, the ambition, was built on a misunderstanding? Finally she knocked. Ray looked up from his desk. You came. I need to talk to you, privately. He stood, gesturing to the door. Conference room, now. They entered the glass-walled room and shut the door. Ray leaned against the table, arms crossed, like armor returning. She's gone, Samantha said. Ray blinked. What? She passed away last night, peacefully. For a moment, Ray didn't react. He just stared at the floor. Then his jaw clenched, but he said nothing. There's more, Samantha added. She left this. She slid the envelope toward him. Ray took it cautiously, like it might bite. He unfolded the letter first, reading quickly. His fingers twitched. His face hardened. Then he opened the will. Silence. More silence. Finally, she had money? Samantha nodded. A lot. Land, stocks, property. She kept it from you because she didn't want your relationship to be about guilt. Ray said nothing. His breath came faster, his knuckles white around the paper. She left it all to you, he laughed. A sharp, bitter sound. Of course she did. Ray, do you know what it's like? He snapped, voice cracking. To work until your body breaks? To skip meals in college? To hide that you couldn't afford textbooks while your classmates drove imported cars? Yes, Samantha said gently. I do. He looked at her, startled. I was homeless at 16, she said. My dad drank, and my mom left. I've cleaned hotel bathrooms and slept on friends' couches. I know what it feels like to carry your own shame like a suitcase. Ray stared at her, as if seeing her for the first time. I'm not telling you this to compare. She added, I'm telling you because I understand why this hurts. But you need to see something else, too. She wasn't keeping it from you to control you. She was trying to protect you from becoming this. She tapped the paper. This man who believes he was unloved, forgotten. She never forgot you. Ray sank into a chair, covering his face with both hands. For the first time, he looked completely human. She used to sing to me, he whispered, when I had nightmares. I'd pretend I was asleep, but I'd stay awake just to hear her voice. Samantha didn't speak, and then she stopped singing, he said. After we got evicted. After the night she cried in the hallway and thought I didn't hear. I thought she changed. No, Samantha said softly. She broke. And then kept walking. Ray's shoulders trembled. I don't want the money, he whispered. She didn't leave it as a bribe, Samantha said. She left it as proof. You came from someone strong. Not someone who failed you, someone who survived for you. Ray wiped his face, eyes raw. After a long pause, he asked, will you go with me? Where? To her house. I haven't been back since I was 16. Samantha nodded. Of course. That evening, they drove in silence to the old neighborhood, Eleanor's last apartment, tucked between a shuttered bookstore and a laundromat. The air smelled like fried onions and gasoline. A streetlight buzzed overhead. Ray stopped in front of the building and stared. She used to stand in that window, he said quietly. Watch me walk to the bus stop every morning. They went inside. The landlord had already cleared out most of the furniture. But the walls still held her presence, old picture hooks, sun-faded spots where frames had once hung, the faint scent of lavender and paper in her bedroom. Ray found a small tin box tucked behind a drawer. Inside were photos. One of him at age 7, gap-toothed and beaming. One of a woman holding a baby with tired eyes and a gentle smile. And one of Ray at graduation, taken from a distance. "She came," he whispered. "She never stopped watching over you," Samantha said. "Even when you couldn't see it." Ray closed the tin, then looked at Samantha. "What do I do with all of this?" he asked. "The money, the memories, the grief." "Start by not ignoring it," she said. "And then, maybe use it for something good." Ray nodded slowly. "I think I want to start a fund," he said. "For single mothers, ones like her. The kind no one ever sees." Samantha smiled. "She'd like that." He looked around the room again, the weight of years pressing into the silence. "I think," he said finally, "I want to hear her sing, just once more." And in the hush of the evening, he pulled out his phone and played a recording. One she must have left behind. Her voice filled the room, thin but strong, humming an old lullaby. The kind only a mother would remember. Samantha closed her eyes and listened. And together, they mourned not just the woman who'd passed, but the years they had lost to silence, and the hope that maybe, just maybe, redemption had finally begun. The first Monday, after Eleanor's funeral, came cloaked in silence. Ray stood in front of the building that bore his name, Foster Tech, the product of 2 decades of sleepless nights, relentless drive, and a hunger that once came from having nothing. Now with Eleanor's will in his coat pocket and a mother's ghost in his mind, the glass and steel tower felt less like a monument and more like a question. He stared at his own reflection in the door-sharp suit, cold expression, hands clenched. And he saw her face instead. "I'm going to change everything," he whispered to no one. Then he walked inside. Samantha arrived 2 hours later and noticed it. Immediately something was different. The front desk receptionist gave her a tight smile and pointed toward the executive conference room. "Mr. Foster wants everyone there. He's making an announcement." She stepped in warily. The department heads were already gathering: legal, finance, marketing, even operations, all wearing the same confused, tight-lipped expression. Ray walked in, dressed in a slate-gray suit, no tie, sleeves rolled. His usual steel-eyed silence was replaced with something softer, and that alone unsettled people. He stood at the head of the table, took a slow breath, and began. "I've made decisions in this company that were driven by fear, by scarcity. I built this place with the mindset of a starving man. Every risk was life or death. Every deal was war. That mindset built an empire, yes, but it also cost me more than I want to admit." Silence. Samantha sat straighter, watching him carefully. Ray continued, "Many of you know my background. You know I grew up poor. But what you don't know is why I kept it that way. I believed I was abandoned. That my mother left me in a system that chewed us both up. That she stopped loving me when I needed her most." He paused. Something behind his eyes flickered. "I was wrong." He slid a document onto the table. "This is my mother's will. She passed away last week. She left behind a fortune. She never used, never flaunted. She kept it hidden from me because she didn't want me to love her for what she had. She wanted me to remember who she was. And I didn't, until it was too late." People shifted in their chairs. Ray's voice remained steady, but softer now. "So here's what's happening. I'm taking $3 million from that inheritance and starting a fund in her name, the Eleanor Foster Foundation. It will serve single parents, especially those coming out of housing insecurity, domestic abuse, or the foster system. We're going to build pathways, not just pipelines." Murmurs rose around the table. "I know this is a shift," he added, "but it's the one that matters. We're not just going to innovate in tech. We're going to lead with purpose. And if that makes us vulnerable in some ways, then so be it. I'm done leading from fear. A long pause. Then, to everyone's surprise, Samantha stood. I support this, she said clearly, and not just as an executive, but as someone who's lived it. My mother left me too. My father tried, but he was broken. I slept in my car. At 17, no one gave me anything, so I clawed my way up. Like Ray. She looked at him now, and for the first time, I think we have a chance to build something that matters. Ray's eyes met hers, grateful, heavy, and one by one, the department heads nodded, some slowly, some reluctantly. But none walked out. The news spread quickly. Ray Foster, the cutthroat CEO, who once fired an intern for submitting a late report, had announced a philanthropic fund in his estranged mother's name. The press dubbed it his redemption arc. But for Ray, it was just survival of a different kind. By Wednesday, Samantha found herself in a small rented office 2 floors below the executive suite. It was temporary headquarters for the Eleanor Foster Foundation. The place smelled like fresh paint and hope. She wasn't sure why she volunteered to lead the launch. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was belief. But when Ray had asked, "Will you help me build this?" she hadn't hesitated. As she unpacked the first box of files, a woman walked in. Mid-30s, tired eyes, holding a toddler on one hip and a file in her hand. "I saw the post online," she said. "About the new housing scholarships. Is that real?" Samantha smiled. "It's very real." The woman sighed in relief, then began to cry quietly. Samantha reached for a box of tissues and whispered, "You're the reason this place exists." Later that evening, as the last intern left and the building lights dimmed, Ray entered the office with 2 coffees. "I figured you'd still be here." Samantha looked up. "I'm a little obsessed." He handed her a cup. "I get that." They stood in silence for a moment. "I met a woman today," she said. "Her name's Maritza. She's living in her car with her daughter. Laid off during her pregnancy, and her landlord changed the locks." Ray exhaled. "I used to sleep in a shelter that smelled like bleach and cigarettes. And one night, the guy next to me got beat up for his shoes. I swore I'd never go back." "You didn't," Samantha said. "I did. In my head I never left." She looked at him closely. "You're changing, Ray, and it's terrifying, isn't it?" He smiled faintly. "Terrifying doesn't even begin to cover it." But not everyone was cheering for his transformation. In a penthouse conference room across town, Gregory Thorne, board member and longtime investor, watched the footage of Ray's speech with narrowed eyes. "He's weakening the company," Gregory muttered. "Turning a machine into a charity." Beside him, Lucinda Crane, head of investor relations, crossed her arms. "He's got a following. PR is eating it up." Gregory leaned forward. "We didn't invest millions into Foster Tech so Ray could play redemption hero. If he wants to hand over the reins, I'll gladly take them." Lucinda hesitated. "He still holds majority." "For now," Gregory said darkly. And just like that, a silent coup began brewing behind the scenes. Meanwhile, Ray and Samantha continued to expand the foundation. By Friday, they had secured a partnership with a local shelter. A small 2-bedroom unit was funded and furnished for Maritza. When she walked in for the first time, she collapsed to the floor and sobbed. Ray was there. He helped her up, awkward at first, but steady. "You matter," he said to her. "This is yours, no strings." And as he left, Maritza whispered to her daughter, "That man saved our lives." That night, Samantha and Ray sat on the roof of the Foster Tech building. The city stretched beneath them, loud and glowing. For once, neither was rushing home. Neither had anywhere else to be. "You ever think about what this company would be without pain driving it?" Samantha asked. Ray nodded slowly. "It'd be smaller, but maybe better." She studied him. "You used to think kindness was weakness." "I still do," he admitted. "But I'm learning that some kinds of weakness are worth choosing, like vulnerability, like asking for help. He looked at her now, something new in his eyes, like trusting someone. Samantha smiled. Well, that's progress. They clinked their coffee cups together. No champagne, no speeches. Just two people, scarred and trying. Watching the city they were finally ready to change. But even in quiet victories, shadows lingered. That same evening, a courier delivered an envelope to Gregory Thorne's apartment. Inside were internal memos, account statements, and a whisper of something damning, a paper trail tied to Eleanor's inheritance, and an anonymous claim questioning the legality of how Ray obtained the assets. Gregory smiled grimly. If he wants to play saint, he said, we'll see how long he can wear the halo. The air inside the boardroom was colder than usual. Not because of the temperature, but the tension. It was just after 8 a.m. when Ray stepped into the executive meeting, holding a black leather folder under his arm. The city behind him blazed with morning light, but the room felt overcast with something else, something invisible, thick and waiting. Across from him, Gregory Thorne smiled a little too easily, a steaming mug of dark roast coffee cradled between his hands. Next to him, Lucinda Crane tapped a pen lightly against her notepad, her eyes sharp beneath those corporate polished glasses. Ray nodded to the others, aware of their looks, uneasy, searching, cautious. He could feel it in their silence. Whispers. We're growing legs. I want to start today's meeting with a report from the foundation, Ray said, his tone clipped. We've secured housing for 3 more single parents this week. Community engagement is up 200%. And we're currently finalizing a mentorship partnership with 3 schools in underfunded districts. Mild nods followed, a couple polite claps. But the energy didn't lift. Ray raised an eyebrow. Something I'm missing? Gregory leaned back with a practiced sigh. Ray, no one's questioning the heart behind what you're doing. But this is a tech company. Investors are jittery. The last quarterly earnings call was solid, but not exceptional. Lucinda chimed in. You've shifted over 10% of our operational focus toward non-revenue initiatives in just 3 weeks. The numbers don't lie, Ray. Ray folded his hands together. We made $180 million last quarter. We can afford to care. Yes, but caring doesn't pay dividends, Gregory replied smoothly. And it doesn't protect shareholder value. For a second, Ray said nothing. Then he stood slowly. You want a statement? Fine, I'll give you one. This company was built on risk, on vision, and yeah, maybe even on fear. But I won't apologize for choosing humanity. And I won't let a room full of polished neckties turn purpose into weakness. He leaned forward, voice cold. If anyone here thinks I'm a liability, say it, or move aside. Silence. No one moved, but Ray saw it then in Gregory's eyes. Not fear, strategy. And suddenly, Ray understood. They weren't trying to stop him today. They were laying the trap. That night, Samantha sat at her small desk inside the Eleanor Foster Foundation office, reviewing files on new applicants. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly above her, and the city hummed outside the windows. She rubbed her eyes and pushed back from the desk. Exhaustion had been her constant companion these last few weeks, rewarding, yes, but heavy. As she reached for her bag, her phone buzzed. It was a message from one of the junior legal analysts in Foster Tech's compliance department. FYI, someone's digging into the inheritance paperwork. From the top, thought you should know. Quiet for now, but it smells like something's being built. Samantha stared at the message, a chill threading down her spine. She grabbed her coat, stepped out into the hallway, and headed straight to Ray's private office. Ray was still at his desk when she arrived, the only light in the room coming from his desk lamp and the soft glow of the skyline behind him. You need to see this, Samantha said, tossing her phone in front of him. Ray read the message, then read it again. His face remained composed, but his eyes sharpened. Gregory, it has to be, she replied. It's the only move that makes sense. Ray ran a hand through his hair. If he questions the legality of the transfer, he can drag this whole thing into court. Tie up the funds, freeze assets, and make me look like I'm laundering or leveraging her death for profit. Samantha crossed her arms. Is there any reason he'd actually succeed? Ray hesitated. There's one clause, he admitted. When my mother passed, she hadn't officially updated her living trust. The original had no mention of me, and the letter she left naming me as her sole heir, while authentic, wasn't notarized. Technically, it rides on intent, not ironclad legality. Samantha blinked, so it could be challenged. Ray nodded once. She stepped closer, voice low. Then you need to get ahead of this. Publicly. If he breaks it to the press first, it'll look like you're hiding something. Ray leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He's not just coming for the foundation, he murmured. He's coming for everything. The next morning, it began. An anonymous tip was leaked to the financial press. Allegations that Ray Foster had illegally seized control of an undisclosed inheritance to fund a personal vanity project under the guise of a nonprofit. Words like embezzlement and fraud were splashed across headlines. #FosterFall trended by noon. By lunchtime, 2 sponsors had pulled from Foster Tech's next tech summit. By 3 p.m., a government watchdog agency had requested an informal audit. Ray stood by the conference room window as the crisis team buzzed behind him. Phones ringing nonstop. Samantha walked in with a folder. We've drafted a public statement, she said. Clean, clear. You outlined the facts, addressed the letter, and confirmed the foundation's financial separation from Foster Tech. Ray didn't answer. Ray. Still nothing. Samantha stepped in front of him. You're freezing. He blinked. This. This was how it felt before, he said. When I was 16. When the social worker told me my mother never came back. I thought, this is the end. There's nothing else. She touched his arm. You're not that kid anymore. No, he said slowly. But I've never stopped living like. I am. Samantha held his gaze. Then maybe it's time to stop. He looked at her. Something in him shifted. Resolve. Fire. You're right. He turned back to the room. Get the PR team. Full statement in 30. And book me on GBC tonight. Live. That evening, the lights inside the television studio were blinding. Ray sat under them. Across from anchor Linda Chavez, a seasoned journalist known for slicing through evasive language like a surgeon. Mr. Foster, she began, you've been accused of misusing your mother's estate to build a foundation that directly enhances your company's image. Some are calling it performative philanthropy. Others say fraud. What do you say? Ray didn't flinch. I say my mother died alone, he said plainly. I say I failed her. And I say I'm not going to fail the people she wanted to help. He leaned in slightly. Yes, she left behind money. Yes, I used that to start a nonprofit. And I'll show you every transaction. Every receipt. Every board approval. Because this isn't about money. It's about legacy. It's about choosing to break a cycle. To be the person who stays when no one else did. Linda arched a brow. So this isn't about redemption? Ray smiled faintly. Of course it is. But not for me, for the kids who need it. The mothers who need it, the fathers trying not to fall apart. The room was silent. Then she asked softly, what would your mother say if she could see you now? Ray's voice caught. Just for a second, she'd probably laugh. Then call me a stubborn idiot. Then tell me she loved me anyway. When the segment aired, it changed everything. Not all at once. But the tide turned. Comments flooded in, people who'd been through the same. Lost parents, broken systems. People who needed help and finally saw someone trying to give it. The story shifted from scandal to resilience. From controversy to compassion. But in a dark corner office, Gregory Thorne watched the clip in silence. Then, with a flick of his wrist, He pulled a file from his drawer. It was a background report on Samantha. Her real name, her former employer, and something else. A sealed police record. He smirked. If I can't break him, he said, I'll break her. The email subject line was blank. No signature. No attachments. Just a single sentence in the body. Does he know who you used to be? Samantha stared at the screen, her pulse thudding in her ears. The message had arrived at 2:17 a.m., sent from an anonymous burner address. She sat alone in the darkened foundation office, city lights flickering beyond the glass, her half-empty coffee cold at her side. She read the message again and again. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. She didn't reply. She closed the laptop instead, stood up too quickly, and nearly knocked over the chair. She hadn't thought about that part of her life in years. The part buried so deeply it was like it belonged to another person, a different name, a different version of herself, young, angry, terrified. The version she'd killed to survive, but it wasn't dead. Not anymore. It was waking up. That morning, Ray was on the 22nd floor of the Foster Tech headquarters, standing in front of a giant whiteboard, markers in hand, flanked by two exhausted but loyal members of his innovation team. Diagrams, strategy drafts, and fiscal models covered every available surface. We pivot the story by making the foundation a case study in sustainable outreach, he explained. We publish impact reports, invite transparency audits, and reframe the nonprofit not as charity, but innovation, human innovation. A knock on the glass. Samantha stepped in, composed but pale. Ray's face softened the moment he saw her. Hey, I was just about to call you in. We've got something. I think we need to talk, she interrupted quietly. Ray picked up on her tone instantly. He dismissed the team with a nod, and they filed out without a word. As soon as the door clicked shut, he crossed the room. Samantha remained near the entrance, as if physically incapable of stepping further in. What is it? He asked. She looked up, and her voice was steady, but her eyes shimmered with a fear he hadn't seen in her before. I haven't told you everything about who I am, where I come from. Ray blinked. You mean your childhood? She shook her head. No, I mean the years before I applied to Foster Tech. The years before I was Samantha Lane. That stopped him cold. I'm not on LinkedIn because there's nothing real on it, she said. I built that resume from scratch. My credentials, my certifications, they're legitimate now. But before that, she swallowed. My name was Ellie Marcus. Ray went still. It wasn't a name he recognized, but the way she said it, it felt like a ghost had just walked into the room. When I was 19, she continued, I got involved with someone. He was older, charismatic, a real crusader type. Anti-corporate, anti-wealth, anti-establishment. He had this whole underground group trying to expose the system. She paused. At first, I thought we were just doing research. You know, data. Leaks, financial sleuthing, community awareness. But it turned into something darker. Ray didn't interrupt. He let her speak. He convinced me to help him access encrypted networks, bank files, donation chains, even political donors. I had no idea he was using the data to blackmail people. When the FBI finally cracked down, he pinned it all on me. I was arrested. 18 months of my life disappeared into a courtroom and a halfway house. Records sealed only because I agreed to testify. She met his eyes now. That's the part Gregory's digging into. Ray didn't look shocked or angry. Instead, his expression was unreadable. Why didn't you tell me? I was scared, she said honestly. Not of you, of losing this. Everything we're building. Everything I've built to try and be someone else. Someone useful, good. She stepped forward finally, and there was something desperate in her eyes. If this gets out, Ray ... They won't just crucify me. They'll use it to destroy you. Everything the foundation stands for. We can't survive both scandals. Not now. Ray's voice, when it came, was low. Do you regret what happened? Her breath caught. Every day. Do you believe you became someone better? A beat. Yes. He reached forward and took her hand, firm and certain. Then they don't get to use your past like a weapon. But Gregory wasn't playing fair. Later that night, a package arrived at a local journalist's office. No return address. Inside, a red USB drive. And on it, a folder titled The Skeleton Key. Contained within, sealed juvenile court records, archived photos of Samantha leaving the courtroom under police escort, early chat logs from a now-defunct dark web forum where LEM posted under a pseudonym. The journalist's name was Deanna Hargrove, independent, hungry, known for breaking uncomfortable stories. But she wasn't reckless. Before publishing, she called Samantha directly. I think you should know, she said. I've seen this kind of play before. Someone's trying to discredit you. I'm not saying the documents aren't real, but the motive behind their release, it stinks. Samantha's voice didn't tremble. Do what you have to. But ask yourself, what story are you really telling? Deanna hung up. An hour later, she uploaded an op-ed instead of an expose. The title? Redemption is not a crime. She told the whole story fact-checked, unflinching, and nuanced. She didn't hide Samantha's past, but she framed it in the context of transformation. Courage. Grace. The article went viral within 2 hours, and just like that, Gregory's dagger dulled, but not entirely. At 2 a.m., Ray's personal phone rang. Samantha's car was broken into, said the voice on the other end. She's okay, but they took her laptop and a physical folder she'd left on the passenger seat. It had internal HR files, names, applicant profiles, addresses. Ray sat up, heart hammering. They're going after our people. By morning, Ray had tightened security around the foundation and initiated a new policy. All personal information was to be encrypted and compartmentalized. Still, the damage was done. The people they helped, mothers, children, survivors, were scared. Few even pulled out. The trust they'd worked so hard to build was now cracked. Samantha stood in the middle of the main office later that day, watching the quiet unraveling. I didn't mean for this to happen, she whispered. Ray walked over and stood beside her. Let me show you something. He led her outside, where a small group had gathered, families the foundation had helped. One by one, they came up, offering hugs, small gifts, handwritten cards. An older woman held out a photo. It was her son, now employed, sober, smiling. You believed in him, she told Samantha. No one else did, so we're staying. Whatever happens. Samantha blinked away tears. Ray looked at her. We're not here because we're flawless. We're here because we didn't stay broken. Later that night, Ray found a package at his home. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper with a typed message. Next time we go deeper. Some skeletons don't stay buried. Ray crumpled the note slowly. Then he picked up the phone and dialed someone he hadn't spoken to in years. It's time, he said. We bring Gregory down. It was nearly midnight when Ray closed his office door, turned the lock, and pulled the blinds. The air in the room felt charged electric, on the edge of combustion. In his hand was a burner phone, one he hadn't used in years. It had sat in the bottom of a desk drawer, forgotten under old project plans and personal journals. The last number dialed was still burned into the screen. He pressed call. 2 rings. Then a voice answered, calm, clipped, and sharp. Say it. Ray took a breath. I need you. A pause. Who's the target? Gregory Thorne. That got a low, bitter laugh. You always did pick the pretty devils. Can you do it? You know the answer. Ray's voice hardened. I don't want him ruined. I want him exposed. Every lie, every dirty deal, every life he's crushed for profit, I want it in the light. You want justice? No, Ray said. I want the truth to make him burn. 3 days later, a man in a worn leather jacket and mirrored sunglasses walked into the corner cafe across from the Foster Foundation. His name was Vance Mercer, former investigative reporter, former government contract analyst. Now something less definable. He didn't smile when he saw Ray, but his eyes lit up. You know, Vance said as he sat, you could have just sent a holiday card like a normal ex-billionaire trying to save the world. Ray didn't return the sarcasm. He slid a flash. Drive across the table. Vance raised an eyebrow. What's this? Everything I've collected on Gregory over the last 6 years. Back when I still worked for the same men who made him. Vance pocketed it. And you want me to find what I couldn't? Dig into what's off limits? No half measures. What's in it for me? Ray didn't flinch. Truth, and the promise that this time you won't be silenced. Vance grinned. Now you're speaking my language. Meanwhile, Samantha sat in her apartment, sorting through memories like landmines. The press coverage hadn't faded. Deanna Hargrove's piece was still making the rounds, and most responses were overwhelmingly supportive, but not all. Threats trickled in. Thinly veiled, vicious. Online forums unearthed old aliases. Former accomplices reached out, some for reconciliation, others for leverage. Her phone buzzed with unknown numbers. A strange man was spotted near her building. Security cameras caught him pacing the sidewalk for an hour before vanishing. It wasn't just professional now. It was personal, and she was angry. She opened her laptop and pulled up a secure server. Her hand trembled slightly as she entered the credentials. It had been nearly a decade since she accessed this particular toolset, a ghost in the digital machine, a backdoor she built herself. They called it the Black Garden. A sandbox of old code, investigative pathways, AI scrapers, and metadata trackers. If Thorne wanted a war, she'd give him one. Vance's first discovery came within 72 hours. He leaned against Ray's desk with a folder marked Confidential, Thorne Holdings, Shell Pathways. Guess who's been funneling Foundation grant money through dummy nonprofits? He asked. A few of the groups your board voted to support were created just months before getting large 6-figure donations. Ray frowned. You're saying they don't exist? They exist, Vance replied, on paper. But they're all owned by subsidiaries of a company called Arcadia Reach Limited. Ray stiffened. I know that name. Yeah, Vance said grimly. Because Gregory Thorne owns it. Which means he's been siphoning funds, laundering them through nonprofits, and getting tax breaks in the process. Jesus. That's not the worst part, Vance added. Some of these shell orgs, they're registered in countries with extremely loose child labor laws. Ray went still. Tell me we can prove it. We can, Vance said, tapping the folder. And Samantha's working on cross-referencing the Foundation's original donor chains. If he's touched a single cent meant for families in crisis, he has, Ray said quietly. We just need to show the world. That same night, Samantha made her move. She slipped through firewalls like water through cracks. Thorne's personal server was harder to reach than she expected, encrypted 3 layers deep, routed through custom proxies. But she knew the pattern. He'd been arrogant enough to recycle an old encryption protocol, one she had helped write when she was still with Marcus. She found the key buried in a line of old JavaScript and slipped inside. The first thing she found was a photo. An encrypted image titled Project Seedling. It showed a child, small, barefoot, standing beside an open shipping container stacked with cheap tablets, all marked with the Foster Foundation's logo. Only they weren't real. They were knockoffs, malfunctioning tech used to justify digital outreach programs in underfunded regions. Samantha dug deeper. Dozens of shipments, fake training programs, entire campuses that existed only on paper. She backed up everything, but it was the last file that stopped her breath cold. A conversation. Audio only. Thorne, speaking with someone else, possibly an investor. You don't understand, he said. She was supposed to be disposable, Lane. She was a risk I used to discredit Ray. The scandal was supposed to collapse the foundation, not elevate her. But now people believe in her. They're calling her a survivor. A beat. I don't need survivors. I need silence. Samantha hit save, her heart a drum in her chest. 1 week later, the plan went live. It wasn't a press conference. It wasn't a lawsuit. It wasn't even a formal report. It was a leak. Samantha and Vance coordinated a carefully timed information, dropped to 6 journalists, 3 international watchdogs, 2 corporate whistleblowers, and 1 U.S. senator known for crusading against corporate fraud. The files included a forensic analysis of Arcadia Reach, a breakdown of Gregory's shell networks, proof of redirected donations, audio evidence of malice toward Samantha and intent to destabilize the foundation. They dubbed the folder Project Lantern, because it was time the world saw Gregory Thorne for what he was. The backlash was immediate. News outlets lit up with headlines. Whistleblower exposes billionaire's fake charity rings. From savior to snake, the fall of Gregory Thorne. Foundation hero targeted by corporate sabotage. Gregory issued a statement within 24 hours. Denial, deflection, and a not-so-subtle threat of legal action. But he was met with silence, because no one was listening anymore. Even his investors began to flee. Stocks dropped. Corporate partners severed ties. And then came the subpoenas. Gregory Thorne had built his empire on fear, misdirection, and shadows. But he forgot something crucial. The people he tried to silence were no longer victims. They were witnesses. Ray stood beside Samantha the next day as the board reinstated full funding to every Foster Foundation program. Vance, for once, dressed in something almost formal, sat at the back sipping bad coffee and smirking. When the boardroom erupted in applause, Samantha didn't cry. She just stood tall, like someone who had finally stepped out of the dark. That night, as the city exhaled beneath them, Ray and Samantha stood on the rooftop of the foundation headquarters. The skyline was glittering with life. I was terrified, she admitted, that all I'd ever be was the girl from the shadows. Ray looked at her. You're not, he said. You're the reason the shadows couldn't win. She smiled. Faintly. Do you think it's over? Ray shook his head. No, but it's our turn now. And for the first time in weeks, Samantha believed it. The past hadn't destroyed her. It had forged her. And Gregory Thorne? He'd underestimated the wrong woman. The morning after Gregory Thorne's empire began to crumble, the world didn't pause. In fact, it spun faster. Ray stood at the edge of a crowd gathering outside the Foster Foundation's main headquarters. It wasn't a protest, it was something else. Survivors, beneficiaries, former employees, volunteers, families who had been touched by the Foundation's work showed up not in anger, but in defiance of Thorne's corruption. They weren't there to tear anything down. They were there to lift something up. Samantha watched from the window above, coffee growing cold in her hand. A young mother down below held up a cardboard sign in shaky handwriting. I'm not a statistic. Thank you for saving my son. It nearly broke her. Not from pain, from something worse, from hope. You okay? Ray asked softly from behind. She turned. I thought I'd feel vindicated. I thought I'd be free. But I feel like I'm standing in the middle of a house that's still on fire. He nodded, stepping beside her. Because it is. The damage Thorne did wasn't just legal or financial, it was moral. The trust people put into outreach, philanthropy, second chances. He turned all of it into a tool for self-interest. And people like Samantha paid the price. First as scapegoats. Then as survivors trying to rebuild from ashes. Now the embers were everywhere. And the real fire was still coming. By noon, 4 new lawsuits had been filed against Gregory Thorne, 3 from former employees, One from an overseas contractor who claimed Thorne paid them in fake invoices and promised donations that never arrived. The testimonies weren't just damning. They were specific. Every dotted line, every signed deal, was backed up by screenshots, receipts, audio clips. Vance had spent the previous night cross-referencing every contract they uncovered. What he found stunned even him. Thorne hadn't just laundered money through fake nonprofits. He used those nonprofits to funnel bribes, backdoor payments to government officials, campaign donors, and tech firms. In exchange, he was given insider access to infrastructure plans, allowing him to position himself as the first bidder, the cheapest bidder, or sometimes the only one. This wasn't just fraud, Vance said during a late-night call. It was a syndicate. And I'm betting the people he worked with won't stay loyal once the indictments come, Ray agreed. They'll throw him to the wolves. Samantha, listening in, said quietly, "Let them, but we're not finished. Not until the whole story is told." Later that evening, Samantha received a message from an anonymous email. "You think you've won, but you don't know what you started. Get ready to lose everything." She didn't flinch. Instead, she logged into her old black garden terminal and traced the message's origin. It had been bounced through 5 IPs, scrubbed twice, and disguised as a standard newsletter. But G made one mistake. He left metadata in the email header. A small tag referencing a campaign file named Forbes Cover Preview. She ran it through a deep search AI index and found an archived cache of Thorne's private PR campaign, scheduled features, magazine mock-ups, a draft of a Forbes cover story, naming Gregory Thorne as the philanthropist who changed the world. Scheduled release, 1 month from now. Samantha stared at the screen. She didn't need to see her own face in the document's appendix, labeled Talking Points for Controlling. Lane narrative. The world needed to see this, not just the money trail, not just the fraud, the intent. She forwarded it to Vance. Leak it all. The next morning, the story exploded across every major outlet. Headlines read, "Thorne's empire built on lies and victims." Exclusive. PR documents reveal how Thorne orchestrated his hero. Image by silencing whistleblowers. Samantha Lane targeted as scapegoat in global fraud scheme. The narrative had shifted. Samantha was no longer the former intern with a checkered past. She was the woman who took on a corporate titan and won. People who once whispered behind her back now quoted her words on social media. Schools used her story in digital ethics classes. A petition was started demanding national legal protections for whistleblowers like her. Within 48 hours, it had over 1 million signatures. Still, victory was not without its shadows. Someone broke into her old apartment. Nothing was stolen. Just overturned furniture, shattered picture frames. A message was left on her bathroom mirror in red lipstick. "Stop." Ray offered to move her somewhere safer, but Samantha refused. "If he wants to scare me," she said, "he'll have to do better than dollar store threats and broken glass." But inside, she felt the tremor in her chest. Not fear. Something colder. Resolve. Across the country, people began digging into their own encounters with Thorne Holdings. A former warehouse manager went public, revealing that shipment labels for charity goods had been swapped with defective merchandise. A former PR agent showed emails suggesting that Thorne bought positive press coverage from smaller news outlets in exchange for sponsorship funds. One girl no older than 15 posted a TikTok video claiming she had been featured in one of Thorne's foundation commercials under the guise of receiving a scholarship. The truth? Her family never saw a dime. The video went viral. In it, she held up a school uniform that still had the tag on it from the day of filming. "Thorne used me to pretend he cared," she said, her voice shaking. "But my mom still works 3 jobs. We still haven't gotten help." The internet did not forgive. And Thorne's downfall was now fueled by voices from every corner of the world dotted his estate. Gregory Thorne stared at the footage playing across his 5-monitor security feed. His face, once smooth and camera-ready, now looked tight, pale, and creased with lines. His assistant entered, pale as parchment. "They froze your accounts," she whispered. "The Swiss one too, and the Cayman Trust is being audited." Thorne stood slowly, adjusting his cufflinks like a man preparing for a televised apology. "I want you to find me a new publicist," she hesitated. I don't think that will help anymore." He turned to her. "Then find someone who will." But it was already too late, because behind him, one of the monitors changed. A live feed. Samantha Lane, speaking at a youth outreach center. Surrounded by kids, her voice steady, her words calm. "She's trending higher than you," his assistant said softly. "You can't bury her anymore." Thorne stared at the screen. And for the first time in years, he looked afraid. That evening, Ray hosted a quiet dinner at the foundation's rooftop garden. No media, no cameras. Just the core team, Samantha, Vance, Deanna Hargrove, and a few board members who had helped fight the cover-up. They raised glasses. To truth, to redemption. To fire that didn't burn, but illuminated. Samantha sat quietly, her gaze drifting toward the skyline. She didn't speak much. But when Ray asked her how she felt, she finally replied. "Like I've been walking in fog for 10 years, she said. "And now the sun's rising. It's not warm yet, but it's light. And that's enough." Vance clinked his glass to hers. "To light then." And all around her, the echoes of fire faded into the glow of something new. The summons came on a Thursday, unmarked envelope. No return address. Just a single sheet of thick white paper, folded once and hand-delivered to the front desk of the foundation. "Samantha Lane is requested to appear before the House Oversight Committee as a material witness in the investigation into Gregory Thorne and associated parties. Subpoena enclosed." She read it 3 times. By the third, her hands stopped shaking. Ray leaned over her shoulder, his face unreadable. "They're calling you to testify." "They're calling me to remember," she whispered, "because that's what it really was not. A legal proceeding, not a bureaucratic hearing. It was a reckoning. Not just for Thorne, for everyone who looked the other way while he bought their silence with charm, money, or fear, for everyone who told Samantha to let it go. 3 days later, Samantha sat in a white-walled holding room beneath the Capitol. Her palms were damp. Her notes, typed and color-coded, lay untouched beside her. She wasn't nervous about speaking. She was afraid of what would rise up in her when she did. She could feel it, just under the surface, years of being ignored, gaslit, dismissed. Humiliation of being blamed for something she tried to stop. The way her name had once been used in boardrooms as a joke. "Don't do a Samantha," they used to say. "Keep your mouth shut." Ray waited just outside the door, wearing a tailored black suit and a rare look of tension. When she glanced over, he gave a small nod. The kind that said, "I'm here. You've got this." A staffer opened the door. "They're ready." The hearing room was packed. Journalists lined the walls. Cameras clicked. On the panel sat 5 members of Congress, their nameplates cold and official. At the center sat Senator Marie Calloway, a longtime advocate for corporate transparency. Her gaze locked onto Samantha with unflinching calm. "Ms. Lane," she said, "thank you for joining us." Samantha sat down, adjusted the mic, and began. What followed was not a performance. It wasn't even testimony in the traditional sense. It was a release. She spoke not like a whistleblower, but like a survivor. With clarity, precision, and an undercurrent of grief sharpened by purpose, she told them about the day she first discovered the misappropriated funds. How she'd approached her superior with documented discrepancies, only to be transferred within a week. She described the meeting with Thorne where he'd smiled and said, "Let me protect you from yourself," before offering her a cushioned Job in another city. She described the spiral that followed her termination, the media smear, the months of unemployment, the constant questioning of her own memory. Calloway leaned forward. "Why didn't you come forward earlier?" Samantha's voice didn't waver. "Because I was 24, drowning in shame." And everyone in the room already believed the man with the tailored suit and the foundation named after him. Murmurs stirred in the gallery. She continued, walking them through her investigation. The buried documents, the offshore accounts, the patterns hidden inside PR campaigns and charity auctions, and the victims, individuals and communities who never received the aid they were promised. When she was finished, the room was silent. Senator Calloway sat back. "Ms. Lane, we owe you an apology, and the country owes you a great deal more." That night, the clip of Samantha's testimony reached over 6 million views on social media. News anchors called it one of the most damning whistleblower testimonies in recent history. Newspapers dubbed her the woman who brought down a giant. But all Samantha could do was stare at her phone in silence, her thumb hovering over the screen. "I don't want to be a symbol," she said to Ray. "I just wanted it to stop." "You didn't become a symbol," he replied. "You became the person who didn't run." She let that sink in. The praise, the noise, the headlines, it felt unreal. But what grounded her wasn't the public's applause. It was a quiet message she received that night. From someone she hadn't seen in years. Her mother. "I saw you on the news. You were brave. I'm sorry I ever doubted you. Come visit when you're ready." The words hit harder than anything else. Not because they were perfect, but because they were real. 3 days later, Thorne was officially indicted on 18 federal charges: wire fraud, money laundering, tax evasion, conspiracy. But the real damage was to his legacy. The man once considered a modern-day Carnegie was now the face of one of the largest philanthropic frauds in U.S. history. He was arrested without fanfare in his penthouse, escorted out in a hoodie and handcuffs. His lawyer issued a statement, claiming he was being targeted by media hysteria and disgruntled employees. No one bought it. Samantha watched the coverage on a muted screen at the foundation. It didn't bring her joy, but it did bring peace. Still, the story wasn't over. At the foundation's board meeting the next week, Deanna Hargrove brought up something that shook the room. "There's something else," she said, setting down a file. "We found a subsidiary Thorne used to store hard assets. Not just money, art, contracts, USB drives." Ray frowned. "What's on them?" Deanna looked at Samantha. "One of them is labeled backup lane." The air changed. "I want to see it," Samantha said quietly. They accessed the drive in a secure office, no internet, air-gapped. With a digital forensics expert on standby. Inside were over 100 files. Emails, voicemails, video clips, edited footage, threat drafts, reputation analysis reports. There was even a deepfake prototype using Samantha's face, an unreleased smear campaign. Thorne had apparently considered launching if she ever spoke again. Ray read through one of the documents, face pale. "He planned to erase you." Samantha stared at the screen. It felt like standing in front of her own grave and reading the epitaph someone else wrote. But she didn't flinch. "Then it's a good thing I spoke first." That night, Samantha stood on the rooftop terrace again. Same skyline, same wind brushing across the city lights. But everything was different. Ray joined her, 2 mugs of tea in hand. She took one, smiling slightly. "You remember I don't take sugar?" "I remember everything," he said softly. She didn't respond at first. Then she said, "It's over, isn't it?" Ray looked out at the horizon. "The worst part is, the fallout is just beginning. There'll be new people trying to rebuild the wreckage, but at least they'll be building on truth." She nodded. Behind her, a soft chime rang. Her inbox. Another message, this time from a major university. An invitation to join a panel on digital ethics and whistleblower protection. She didn't answer it yet. Instead, she turned back toward the wind, toward the sound of a city exhaling, and she said to the air, to herself, and maybe to Thorn, "You tried to erase me, but I'm still here." And the wind carried her words into the night like a promise. It had been 6 weeks since Gregory Thorn's arrest, and Samantha Lane still couldn't walk into a cafe without someone whispering her name. Some whispered with admiration, others with awe, and a few with the slow poison of resentment. To some, she had become a hero. To others, an inconvenience, a reminder that silence was no longer safe currency. But today wasn't about any of them. Today was about what came next. She stood outside the charred shell of what had once been the Gideon Youth Center, a community shelter partially funded by Thorn's Foundation. It had burned down 3 years ago, an accidental electrical fire, they'd called it. But now records revealed the building had never been up to code, and Thorn's contractors had pocketed the safety inspection funds. 3 teenagers had died in that fire. Samantha stared at the scorched bricks and melted windows, the stench of smoke long gone but never truly erased. A small sign had been staked in the ground by the city council. Future site of the Phoenix Center, a place to rise. She ran her fingers over the raised letters and exhaled. This time, it wouldn't be a vanity project or a public relations stunt. This time, it would mean something. Is it strange? A voice behind her asked, to stand in the ashes and imagine something beautiful? She turned and saw Ray. Always Ray. He held 2 coffee cups and extended one toward her. Hazelnut. Your favorite. She took it with a grateful nod. I didn't ask you to come. I didn't wait for an invitation, he replied. They stood side by side in silence, watching construction crews measure the foundation line. There was still so much work to be done. Ray glanced at her. Have you thought more about the university's offer? Samantha sipped her coffee. A tenured seat in digital ethics and public accountability. It's tempting. He raised an eyebrow. But? She looked back at the burned-out building. But if I sit in a lecture hall right now, I think I'll feel like I'm hiding. Like I've done enough. You have done enough. She shook her head slowly. That's the trap, Ray. Enough is a privilege the people Thorn hurt will never get back. Ray was quiet for a moment, then nodded. So what do you want to do? I want to build something that outlives the damage. That night, Samantha returned to her apartment, modest, lived in, warm with quiet defiance. On the wall near her desk hung the framed subpoena that had once terrified her. Now it served as a reminder, courage isn't loud. It's consistent. She opened her laptop and pulled up her latest project, the Lantern Initiative. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't backed by celebrities. But it was real. A growing nonprofit dedicated to helping whistleblowers, investigative researchers, and community advocates protect their data, preserve their sanity, and keep their livelihoods intact. The logo was simple, a lit lantern in the dark. Her inbox buzzed. Another message from a girl named Alicia, a 19-year-old temp, from a pharmaceutical company who claimed to have uncovered forged drug trial results. Samantha's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Another girl, another voice no one wanted to hear. She hit reply. Hi Alicia, I believe you, let's talk. 2 weeks later, the Lantern Initiative held its first public forum in a reclaimed library hall in D.C. folding chairs. Free coffee. No press passes. Dozens showed up, some curious, some trembling, some carrying flash drives in their pockets like hidden truths. Samantha opened the event with no script. Most of you know me as the woman who exposed Gregory Thorn. But before that, I was a 24-year-old assistant who thought being quiet would keep me safe. She let the pause linger. It didn't. Silence doesn't protect. It isolates, and what isolates us can eventually bury us. Heads nodded. A man in the third row wept quietly. She smiled gently. You are not alone anymore. One by one, people. Began to share. A nurse from Michigan, who was fired for refusing to alter patient charts. A tech contractor who found evidence of a privacy breach in a military app. A janitor, just a janitor who'd kept copies of forged maintenance reports. In a school where the ceiling later collapsed. Their stories weren't perfect. Some were messy, incomplete, raw, but they were enough. Afterward, as the crowd thinned, Samantha felt a hand tug gently at her sleeve. It was Alicia. She was too young to carry the fear already in her eyes. "I think they're watching my email," she said softly. Samantha leaned in. "Then we move fast." Later that week, as Alicia's evidence began making its way through trusted legal channels, Samantha sat in her office, now flanked by 2 interns and an advisor. The Lantern Initiative was growing faster than she'd expected. Donations, volunteers, a waiting list for case support. And then, a new call. "Deanna Hargrove, I've got something you need to see," she said. "But it can't go through email." An hour later, they met in a quiet park. Deanna handed her a folder. Inside were internal memos and financial reports from Thorne's last 6 months before his arrest. Files that had just been recovered from a corrupted backup drive. One memo stood out. "If Lane resurfaces, we activate Protocol Winterglass." Samantha frowned. "What the hell is Winterglass?" Deanna's expression darkened. "It wasn't just a campaign to discredit you. Thorne hired someone outside help, a digital ghost. Their job was to bury you with misinformation, ruin your digital identity, isolate you from job networks, and monitor anyone close to you." Samantha felt the blood drain from her face. "You're saying someone might still be watching? They haven't been active in months." But the name popped up in chatter from another case we're investigating. Whoever they were, they weren't just working for Thorne. Samantha closed the folder slowly. "So this goes deeper," Deanna nodded. "This goes wider." That night, Samantha stood on her balcony, staring at the city skyline. Just when it felt like things were settling, a new shadow appeared. But this time, she didn't feel small. She wasn't alone. Ray joined her again, as he always seemed to do. They stood in silence until Samantha spoke. "I thought taking Thorne down would be the end of it." Ray gave a dry smile. "Justice isn't a light switch. It's a fuse. You lit it," she exhaled. "Then I better follow it wherever it leads." He looked at her, the city lights flickering in his eyes. "You're not the same person who walked into that hearing." "No," she agreed. "I'm the person who walked out." The next morning, Samantha met with the architects hired to begin construction of the Phoenix Center. As she walked the perimeter of the lot, she paused and reached into her coat pocket. She pulled out a small silver key, the same one she'd carried on a chain since her first office job, her first taste of purpose. She stepped forward and quietly buried it beneath the cornerstone, not as a gesture of forgetting, but as a promise. What was taken will be restored, and what rises next will never belong to fear. The email came at 3:13 a.m., subject line. Winterglass was never just Thorne. No signature, no greeting. Just an encrypted file. Samantha Lane had learned by now that ghosts rarely introduced themselves, but their whispers always left shrapnel. She sat in her dim apartment, the only light coming from her laptop screen and the pale haze of the city glowing through the window. She ran the file through every verification protocol she'd learned in the last year, checked the headers, traced the metadata, even called her friend at the cybersecurity division to cross-reference the file hash. It was real. Inside was a dossier painstakingly documented, detailing a silent network spanning corporate giants, political donors, and foreign shell organizations. At the center of it, a codey name that chilled her to the bone. Winterglass. The project hadn't ended with Gregory Thorne's arrest. It had merely changed hands. Thorne, as powerful as he once was, had only been a middleman and ambitious puppet in a deeper, colder game. He'd activated Winterglass to silence her, but someone else had built it, funded it, protected it. A shadow system designed to discredit whistleblowers, erase damaging leaks, and monitor high-risk truth-tellers. It had already ruined at least a dozen lives. And it was still operational. Samantha stared at the screen for a long time. Her chest ached, not with fear this time, but clarity. She knew what she had to do. She forwarded the file to her Lantern team with a single subject line: "We burn this from the roots." 3 days later, Samantha stood at the front of a crowded press conference. Not in a government building. Not on some shiny TV set. They had rented a warehouse in the old industrial district. Concrete, exposed beams, fluorescent lights. It was honest. It was raw. It was theirs. Behind her stood Alicia, now more confident, steady in her belief. Beside her stood Deanna, Ray, and 3 new faces, people who had risked everything to make this day happen. Samantha stepped up to the mic. "What you're about to see," she said, her voice steady but fierce, "is the truth most people aren't meant to survive. We have spent the last 5 weeks validating every shred of what you are about to witness. This is not theory, this is proof." She turned toward the screen as they played clips. Redacted files, bank transfers, AI-powered smear campaigns, fake social media profiles used to impersonate whistleblowers and discredit them. Gasps, cameras, clicking, some people crying. When the lights came back on, she faced the sea of stunned reporters. There's a system designed to protect the powerful, not through law but through silence, distortion, and erasure. It is called Winterglass, and it is no longer hidden. One hand raised in the crowd. "Aren't you afraid?" Samantha met his eyes. "I was, but I've learned something important. A whisper that refuses to die becomes a roar." The aftermath was a tidal wave. Congressional hearings were launched. CEOs resigned. A senator with deep ties to a Winterglass-affiliated firm fled the country. Social media platforms were forced to reckon with the algorithms that enabled targeted character assassinations. But the most surprising fallout came quietly. Whistleblowers from around the world, teachers, activists, nurses, veterans, began reaching out to the Lantern Initiative. Some shared files. Others simply said, "I thought I was crazy. Now I know I was just right too early." Weeks passed. Then months. The Phoenix Center was nearing completion. A modern sanctuary of hope, designed not just for shelter, but for growth. Samantha visited the site every Saturday morning like clockwork. She didn't speak much during those visits. She simply watched as brick became walls, as plans became rooms, as broken ground began to feel like sacred soil. One morning, Ray joined her on the rooftop terrace of the building. "They want to name one of the wings after you," he said gently. She shook her head. "No, call it after the kids who died. Call it the Gideon Wing. Let them live again through it." Ray nodded, understanding in his silence. She looked out over the city. "Do you think we made a dent?" He tilted his head. "You didn't make a dent, Sam. You changed the weather." She smiled slow, tired, proud. "I just hope people remember it's not about me, or Thorn, or even Winterglass." "What's it about then?" She turned toward him. "It's about what happens when ordinary people refuse to be silent. When we decide that broken systems don't get to bury the truth forever." That night, Samantha received a letter. Real paper. No return address. Inside was a simple note, written in neat, old-fashioned cursive. "You don't know me, but I watched you walk into fire and not look back. You reminded me of who I used to be. I'm ready to help now. No more shadows." There was no signature. Just a phone number and one line underneath. "Whispers become roars when they echo." She smiled. The whisper had grown. On the 1-year anniversary of Thorne's arrest, the Phoenix Center opened its doors. Children laughed in the courtyard. Single parents sat in therapy sessions and support groups. Young adults used the computer labs to apply for jobs and college programs. A mural stretched across the main hallway wall, an abstract image of fire giving way to dawn. At the bottom, in small letters, "Truth lives here." Samantha didn't speak at the opening ceremony. She didn't need to. Instead, she walked through the crowd quietly, smiling as people took ownership of the space. Made it theirs. It wasn't hers anymore. It never had been. Later that evening, she walked home alone, letting the cool night air wash over her. No bodyguards, no press, just the sound of her footsteps and the city breathing around her. At the crosswalk, she saw a girl, early 20s, backpack slung low, shoulders hunched like the world was already too heavy. The girl looked up at her, eyes wide with recognition. "You're her," she whispered. Samantha nodded, not slowing. "I'm someone who didn't stop." The girl hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" Samantha paused. "Sure." "Was it worth it? Everything you lost?" She thought of the job she loved, the friends who distanced themselves, the sleepless nights, the threats, the fire. And then she thought of Alicia. Of the letters, of the kids laughing inside, the Phoenix Center. Of the emails that began with, "I thought I was alone." She smiled. "Absolutely," she said, "every damn second." The light changed. She crossed the street. Behind her, the girl stood a little straighter. Back at home, Samantha took out her old keychain, just one key now, smooth from use. She ran her thumb over it and placed it in a small shadow box frame beside her desk. Then she pulled out a notebook. The first page was blank. At the top, she wrote, "Lanterns lit. Stories of resistance." She stared at the words for a long time, then began writing, not just about what had happened, but about what could still happen, about the way voices tremble before they thunder, about how justice often begins as a whisper, and how, in the end, it is the quiet ones, those who choose truth over comfort, who shape the world.